You're watching JCT TV. This is Bible study for the 21st century. So friends, we're at it now. We have finished Mark chapter 15. We're now into the last chapter of Mark. It's a very short chapter, but boy, it's a profound chapter because it's about the resurrection. The Apostle Paul, many years later in 1 Corinthians 15, talks about the importance of resurrection. He says, if Christ be not risen, then our faith is in vain. We're actually talking about the pivot point of Christian faith. Don't miss this. You're going to love it.
WOW works with local churches in needy countries. We mobilize those churches, pastors, and volunteers in a concerted effort to care for orphans and widows in their homes and villages. Through that strong faith-based platform, we're able to not only provide food, medicine, and crisis intervention, but we're also able to lead these afflicted ones to faith in God. It's powerful, humbling, and well worth the effort. Please support WOW with your generous gifts and faithful prayer. Thank you.
Last time, I spent a lot of time talking about Joseph of Arimathea and the huge price he paid for identifying with Jesus of Nazareth. Ritual defilement and touching the dead body, identifying with Jesus, demonstrating to his Sanhedrin fellows that he was a secret follower of Jesus, bearing social and religious stigma for the rest of his life. Not only him, but his wife, his kids, his grandkids. In many ways, he'd become a kind of a Benedict Arnold, forever stigmatized because of what he did in taking the body of Jesus down and burying him in his in this freshly carved tomb. I just wanted to make one point right here. He rolled a stone against the door. You know, if a movie maker was dramatizing this, he would have set it up in such a way that you realize as a viewer that not only is the body of Jesus being sealed inside that place, but Joseph of Arimathea's past is being sealed as well. This is closure. Closure on his past and no knowledge of where the rest of his life will take him. It's interesting that the gospel writers don't talk about the impact of the resurrection on Joseph and Nicodemus and other secret believers in Jesus, but you can be sure the impact was profound. Okay, so now we're going to pick it up with the resurrection. When the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices that they might come and anoint him. Very early in the morning, on the first day of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. And they said among themselves, who will roll away the stone from the door of the tomb for us? But when they looked up, they saw the stone had been rolled away. It was very large. Entering the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in a long white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen. He's not here. See the place where they laid him? Go, tell his disciples and Peter that he's going before you into Galilee. There you will see him, as he said to you. The two Marys, Mark tells us, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and also Joseph, they come with spices. Now, There's variance here. When you read John's account, most of the embalming has been done by Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. But you can never have too many spices when you want to, cover any possible odor of a decaying body. And because of the great love and honor in which they held Jesus, these female disciples wanted to make sure that all the housekeeping was done. I mean, can you leave it up to men really to do a proper job? And so they had more spices. They probably wanted to, put them in various parts of the tomb, and maybe even outside the tomb, so the whole air, not just the body, was, for a period of a few days at least, sweetened by the spices. And I mentioned last time, the traditional view was that when a person died and was buried, their body was there, their spirit hovered above the tomb for 3 days, and then on the 4th day, it finally fled because decay had set in. That was the standard practice. So for those 3 days, you had all of these aerosols, if you will, to keep any offensive odor at a minimum. So they've come with more spices. And they also want to, probably take some sweet oil, perfumed oil, and pour it over the wrapped body. They were going to do a thorough job here. They come very early in the morning on the first day of the week. Now, what would the first day of the week be? Again, I know what the first day of the week is because I lived in Israel for 7 years, right in Jerusalem. The first day of the week is called Yom Rishon. Yom Rishon in Hebrew means day the first. Yom is day, Rishon, the first. Day the first, Sunday. So don't be confused. When we talk about 3 days, we're talking about he's buried on Friday sometime in the evening. It's into early Saturday morning, really, probably by the time everything was set. So you got Friday, it starts, and then all day Saturday. And then the 3rd day, which is Yom Rishon, he rises from the dead. So it's over a 3-day period, but it's not 3 24-hour periods, just to be clear. So they expected that Jesus' body would be there, and they're a little concerned, about the weight of the stone, because they're going to have to roll it out of the way in order to get into the tomb and, do whatever they want to do in terms of house cleaning and, freshening the place and anointing the body with some perfumed oil and all of that. They get there, and the stone has been rolled away. To their astonishment, the first thing they suspect, you can be sure, is grave robbers. And this was happening a lot in that time of history. And this was a rich man's tomb, and it was not uncommon for rich men's tombs to be vandalized. Thieves would come, sometimes in great numbers, and they had the power to move a stone out of the way. And often there were valuables that were buried with a rich man's body. And so whatever those valuables were, they would steal those things and be on their way. You can be sure this is exactly what they expected had happened. But they look into the tomb, and there's this guy in shining white clothing, a young man, saying, don't be upset, ladies. Guess what? He's not here. He's been, he's risen. Here we go. I was going the wrong way. He's risen. He is not here. He is risen. He is risen has become the standard proclamation on Easter Sunday morning. And you've been to church, and your pastor will stand up, and the first thing he will or she will say is, he is risen. And you, as a congregant, respond verbally, he is risen indeed. When you go into the garden tomb in Jerusalem, it's written right there on the entrance, he is risen. What? He is risen? Now, resurrection was expected in general by the Pharisees. The Pharisees believed in resurrection. You may recall in reading the New Testament for yourself that on the occasion when Jesus went to the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus had died, remember? And he arrives there 4 days after Lazarus has died. And both Mary and Martha are upset that Jesus didn't show up earlier, because if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. You remember that? And he has this conversation with Martha, and he refers to, he will rise again. And Martha says, yeah. She says in a kind of a condescending tone, of course, he'll rise in the general resurrection. Pharisees believed in the general resurrection. The Sadducees, who were the temple elite, did not believe in the resurrection. The Sadducees predicated their worldview and their faith as Jews on what we call the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That was it. There was nothing else for them. And there's no mention in those 5 books of Moses of resurrection, and so they didn't believe in resurrection. And there were many times were arguments about that. And then there were also arguments about, especially with the Pharisees, as to when and how resurrection would occur. And there were schools of thought, and there were debates, and sometimes clashes, over the finer points, trying to parse the sort of the protocols and the events that might surround resurrection. So it was a complicated situation. He is risen, he is not here. How's that? There's no theological debate here. There's no confrontation. See the place where they laid him, all right? As proof, look, he's not here. But no, he hasn't been spirited away by the disciples. No, he has not been stolen by grave robbers. He is risen, and what's more, go back and tell the disciples that he has gone before them to Galilee, and he'll meet them there. What? This is a message. He is risen. He is not here. Behold the place. Go tell. There's a 4-part sermon there for some of you preachers who are listening to me right now. He is risen. He is not here. Behold the place. Go and tell. In many ways, that's what I've been doing my whole life, at least in my adult life, is going and telling. I wasn't there when Jesus rose from the dead. I didn't see the place where his body had laid, although subsequently, as a pastor in Jerusalem for 7 years, I many times was at both potential burial sites. So I've seen the place, or the places, where he was laid. But I wasn't there like these women were there. But I've spent my whole life in the ministry, well over 50 years now, just proclaiming the resurrected Christ. I'm not interested in you adopting my lifestyle. I'm interested in you adopting Jesus' presence and allowing him to become your lifestyle. For me to live as Christ and to die as gain, said the Apostle Paul.
The Bible tells us that true religion is visiting orphans and widows in their distress. The Bible also says that God is a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. Heaven's core values for mankind begin with God's heart for the least of these. When you support WOW, you're in the sweet spot of God's heart for the poor. Yes, we're only a small player in this great drama, but at least we're on the field. Please give generously.
So friends, this was a shocking development for these women. In fact, let me just highlight a few things here. Entering the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in a long white robe sitting on the right hand. They were alarmed, okay? Do not be alarmed. Well, I mean, how could they not be alarmed? I would be alarmed. Wouldn't you be alarmed? Absolutely. What's happened here? Have grave robbers come and stolen him? We know the disciples haven't come and stolen him because, we've just been with them the last several hours. The angel answered their unspoken question. He is risen. What? You mean resurrection actually exists? You see, resurrection had been an academic question. The Pharisees, of which these women probably were influenced by more than anything, maybe they were from Pharisaical families. Pharisees were good people, by the way. They were not all, weirdness. They believed in the scriptures. They raised their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. They attended synagogue and temple, and they tried to do their best, according to the law of Moses. They were, in most cases, very fine and honorable people. Some of them had become Hellenized by, relationship with Rome, which is to be expected. But there were many of them who were very profoundly faithful and deeply committed to the Lord. They believed in resurrection. They believed there was going to be a general resurrection, a final resurrection on the day of the Lord. Martha, in that story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, when Lazarus died and Jesus showed up, too late as far as Mary and Martha were concerned. If you had been here, Master, our brother would not have died. You remember the story? He says to Martha, he will rise again. And she says kind of condescendingly, yeah, we know he'll rise in the general resurrection. But that's not what Jesus was talking about. But it was one thing to talk about resurrection. It was another thing to experience it. The Sadducees, the temple elite, didn't believe in resurrection because they predicated their whole faith around what we call the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The Pentateuch. No mention of resurrection there, so the Sadducees didn't believe in resurrection. They were far more secularized than they were religious, even though they were in charge of temple culture and all of the temple events. Very interesting irony there. But resurrection was what was going on here. Now, it's interesting, living in Jerusalem for those 7 years and being back there many times since for various reasons, including shooting a lot of television programs. I have been in both the Holy Sepulchre, which is now inside the city walls of the old city, and I've also been in the Garden Tomb, which is outside of the Damascus Gate. Both are touted as potential places where Jesus was buried. They're both very remarkable, both very moving, and I'm not going to argue one against the other. I appreciate what the people at the Garden Tomb say. We don't say Jesus was buried here, but it's an excellent visual aid, they'll say in their British accent, visual aid, which it really is. But the point is, both the places are empty. Okay, you can go to the tombs of some of the other famous founders of religions, and their tombs are not empty. Their bodies are still there. Jesus is not there. When you go to the Garden Tomb, right over the entrance, he is risen. You know that when you go to church on Easter Sunday morning, your pastor, he or she, will say, very first thing, he is risen. And you as a congregant will respond with, he is risen indeed. This is the fulcrum of Christian faith. If Christ be not risen, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, our faith is in vain. Okay? This is a critical historical moment for the Christian faith. He is not here. Okay? See the place where they laid him. Go tell his disciples. There's a good 4-part sermon here for any of you who are Bible teachers or pastors. He is risen. He is not here. Behold the place where he lay. Go tell. I've been spending most of my life going and telling, even though I wasn't there when this all happened. But the fact is that the whole point of what I'm doing right now is telling whoever watches on television or on the internet, or I'm telling them about the risen Christ. That's why I'm focusing on Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, and John. I'm spending years now, slowly, just kind of grinding it out, going through the Gospels, because the story of Jesus is the fulcrum of history. I appreciate, the Pauline epistles and Pauline doctrine, and I appreciate what Peter wrote and what John wrote, in the epistles and also in the book of Revelation, all very, very helpful, informative stuff. And I value it, and it has profoundly impacted my life. But what I want you to know is that Jesus is risen. Okay, he is risen. And that's basically what this angel said to the witnesses to the resurrection: go and tell. And generation after generation after generation, over decades and centuries and millennia, have been going out and telling the world that Jesus is not here. He is risen. He is risen indeed, okay? So they went out quickly, and they fled from the tomb. Fled. I like that word. It means that they were young, for one thing, but it also means that they were scared out of their minds. They were pumped with adrenaline. They don't know what's going on. They're trembling. They're amazed, okay? And they can't even speak, saying nothing to anyone. They're afraid, all right? Very afraid. Okay. Then, Mark, if you and I were proofing what he'd written here, we'd say, you missed something here, Mark. You got to fill in the blanks here. You got them running away from the tomb, and now you got him, Jesus, rising early the first day of the week and appearing first to Mary. It's almost like now Mark, has changed the scene, and it's now a retrospective, as you often see in movies. It's gone back a few hours to what happened just earlier in the account. Regardless, I'm not even going to try to parse it. When Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 demons. He'd done a powerful spiritual work in her life. She went and told those who had been with him as they mourned and wept. And when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, here you go, they did not believe. They did not believe, okay? It's so true that a reflex for all of us is unbelief in the face of that which seems to be unbelievable. We use the word incredible all the time now. We overwork the word incredible. In fact, incredible has lost its meaning in modern usage, but incredible means not believable. I don't believe it. It's incredible, not believable. They didn't believe. After that, he appeared in another form to 2 of them as they walked and went into the country. And another gospel, this will refer to an encounter Jesus had with 2 of the disciples, probably some of the 72 who were on their way to their home in Emmaus. Jesus appeared walking with them on the way to Emmaus. They went and told it to the rest. They didn't believe. Later he appeared to the 11 as they sat at the table. He rebuked their unbelief, hardness of heart, because they did not believe. Okay? They did not believe. There's that unbelief word. Hardness of heart. They did not believe. Okay? These are the men who eventually changed the world. The men who gave us much of what we know as the New Testament. In the very moment when they should have been believing, they were unbelieving. They were the very men who had abandoned Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, had run away for their lives, had hidden away in the upper room. I mean, they were anything but models to us at that point in time. And here they are, unbelieving, not believing, hardness of heart, unbelief, okay? And Jesus, instead of, dwelling on it, he says, look, go into all the world. Preach the gospel to every creature. He gives them what's called the Great Commission. He who believes and is baptized will be saved. He who does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will follow those who believe. In my name they'll cast out demons, they'll speak with new tongues, they'll take up serpents. If they drink anything deadly, it will by no means hurt them. They'll lay hands on the sick, and they will recover. Okay? Now, I have to say this just because biblical interpretation and integrity requires it. Verses 6 to 20 of Mark are not in most of the best manuscripts. And most of our Bibles, and probably the Bible you're reading right now as you're following along with me, has an asterisk and something in a note, or maybe this passage is in smaller print, telling you that the earliest manuscripts and some other ancient witnesses do not have verses 9 to 20. Again, that's just simply the case. And so when, reading this, some people take issue with the apparent strangeness of casting out demons and not being hurt by serpents and deadly poison. And, again, I'm not here to argue with that. I have no reason to explain one way or the other how I see it. All I know is when he says go into all the world, he meant it.
Why dance when you have very little? When you live from day to day with food insecurity, rampant disease, sickness, and death? You dance because your heart is full of love for God and your hope is strong. WOW has come alongside as the hands and feet of the Lord, providing both home-based care and assurance of God's love. You're happy and you've got to dance. Please support WOW. Let's keep them dancing.
So friends, at the end of Mark, Jesus commissions his disciples to go into all the world and preach the gospel. It's very important not only to preach the gospel, but then to let the gospel speak for itself. Preaching the gospel does not mean shoehorning people into belief. It does not mean cornering them and forcing them or browbeating them or hitting them over the head with the Bible. Just simply declare Jesus. Talk about the resurrection. Talk about the impact that he's had on your life and the meaning he has taken on in your day-to-day life. And pray for your friend and leave it there. Let the Holy Spirit do the work. Nobody comes except the Father